Have you ever wondered how one of the world's most famous wooden ship model brands actually started? Because here is the twist. It didn't start with the ships at all. It started with dollhouse furnitures. Yeah, tiny chairs, little tables, that kind of thing. Before the majestic galleons, before the sleek sailing yards, before all the naval history we associate with the brand today, back in 1970 in Barcelona, Spain, Artesanía Latina didn't begin in a shipyard. It began in a small apartment, a humble space filled with wood dust, hand tools, and a deep obsession with miniature craftsmanship. The company was founded by Jean-Louis Martin and Maria Mercedes Leg, with help from Maria's father, Raymond Leg. Three people united by one idea: detail matters a lot. That belief was already baked into the name. Artesanía Latina literally means Latin craftsmanship. It wasn't marketing, it was a statement. Back in the 1960s and 70s, dollhouses weren't cheap plastic toys. They were tiny works of art. Everything was handmade, full of character, full of charm. Parents loved them because they sparked the imagination. Collectors loved them because they looked incredible. For its first 2 decades, Artesanía Latina became a major name in the European and the North American dollhouse scene. And what set them apart? They ditched the toy look completely. They went straight for real architecture. Models like the Malibu, Vermont, and London become legendary. Their Victorian and colonial classic houses were massive, multi-room builds, and the furniture, that was serious stuff. Real wood, die-cast parts, sanding, staining, upholstery. This wasn't playtime. This was a proper hobby. They basically invented the idea of the luxury kit: Baltic birch plywood, real shingles, working doors and windows. Things you just didn't see anywhere else at the time. So why them? Why did Artesanía Latina rise above everyone else? Simple answer: timing. They were founded in 1970, right in the middle of Spain's economic boom, often called the Spanish miracle, and they benefited from 3 huge advantages. First, manufacturing infrastructure. Spain was heavily investing in timber, textile, and metal industries. Artesanía Latina gained access to modern machinery and high-quality local woods like walnut and boxwood. Second, low labor costs, high craftsmanship. Spain hits a rare sweet spot: skilled traditional artisans, but labor costs far lower than the UK or the US. That made museum-quality kits possible at almost toy store prices. And third, export incentives. The Spanish government aggressively pushed exports, and Artesanía Latina took full advantage, shipping kits across Europe and into North America almost from day one. Put it all together, and it was the perfect storm. By the late 90s, the market began to shift. Cheap plastic dollhouse kits flooded in, then MDF houses followed, and slowly the traditional dollhouse audience started to shrink. By the mid-2000s, Artesanía Latina phased dollhouses out entirely. But here is the key thing: Artesanía Latina wouldn't depend on just one niche. While one market declined, another was already gaining momentum. In fact, Artesanía Latina had been producing a handful of ship kits as early as the mid-1970s. For Artesanía Latina, the transition to ships made sense on every level. Culturally, it aligned with Spain's maritime heritage. Practically, it fits their existing production methods. The same tools used for dollhouse furniture, miniature lathe, and position saws worked beautifully for ship parts like blocks, dead eyes, and masts. And while dollhouses appealed to a relatively narrow audience, naval modeling was global. A massive community of builders who valued historical accuracy and museum-level realism. And that was something Artesanía Latina already knew how to deliver. So what was the very first Artesanía Latina ship model kit? According to historical inventory records and early 1970s catalogs, the answer is almost universally the Santa Maria, Christopher Columbus' flagship. In Artesanía Latina's early numbering system, the 22,000 series was reserved for their main wooden ship lines, and the Santa Maria constantly appears as the very first entry. Vintage, new old stock boxes from the early 1970s still exist, complete with the original AL logo. Veteran builders on forums like Model Ship Board frequently pointed to these kits as Artesanía Latina's official debut into naval modeling. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to track down any confirmed 1970s Santa Maria box images. If you have one, please post it in the channel. We would all love to see it. And the Santa Maria didn't sail alone for long. It was quickly joined by La Niña and La Pinta, forming what collectors now call the Columbus Trio. Released almost simultaneously, the trio gave collectors a complete historical set right from the beginning. Here is the real proof of how successful those early kits were. Most model companies retire a kit after 10 years, maybe 20, if it's lucky. The Columbus Trio, they have been in continuous productions for over 50 years. They have been retooled multiple times, moving from hand-cut wood to die-cut parts, and eventually to laser-cut kits. But the core design still traced directly back to the early 1970s. That kind of a longevity is almost unheard of in this hobby. Since 1970, Artesanía Latina has released hundreds of ship kits. But when it comes to popularity and sales, a few models stand clearly above the rest. Across the company's entire history, the Mare Nostrum fishing trawler is widely considered Artesanía Latina's top-selling kit by volume. Why? Because it's the perfect first ship. As a motor-powered Mediterranean fishing boat, it avoids complex riggings and towering masts, making it the most common entry point for new builders. It's remained in the catalog for decades and has been repeatedly modernized. Laser-cut parts, updated instructions, even video tutorials, all to keep it as the brand's primary beginner kit. While the Mare Nostrum went on sheer numbers, the HMS Victory is Artesanía Latina's prestige powerhouse. It's arguably the most famous warship in naval history, and Artesanía Latina's version is constantly ranked among the best value for money Victory kit on the market. Despite its expert-level difficulty and premium price, demand never fades. For many builders, this is the dream build, the kit you work towards for years. If the Mare Nostrum is for beginners and the Victory is for experts, then the San Francisco 2 rules the middle ground. I have personally built one myself, and it was an absolute joy. A kit that's challenging, rewarding, and just for plain fun. You can even check out my early build video to see how I put it together. This is the ultimate Goldilocks kit. It delivers all the visual drama of a 16th century Spanish galleon without the overwhelming size and the complexity of massive warships. It was also one of Artesanía Latina's first kits to successfully use double planking, which helped cement its reputation as a must-build for intermediate modelers for over 40 years. If you have built more than a couple of Artesanía Latina's kits, this clear plastic organizer trays probably look very familiar. I have personally collected about a dozen of them over the years, and I still use them all the time. Perfect for storing leftover fittings, tiny parts, and random modeling gadgets. Let me know in the comments how many you have collected and what you use them for. These trays eventually became standard in Artesanía Latina's higher-end ship kits, but they didn't appear overnight. Builders who opened the 1986 Blue Nose 2 remember everything neatly sorted and easy to find. Meanwhile, owners from earlier kits like the 1982 Swift were still dealing with parts bundled the old-school way, stuffed into bags or foam. It seems like a small detail, but at the workbench, it made a huge difference. In the late 1990s, Artesanía Latina began transitioning from die-cut wood to laser-cut parts, and this marked a true turning point for the brand. Laser cutting delivered tighter tolerances and introduced interlocking components, dramatically reducing the sanding, trimming, and the gaswork builders had dealt with for decades. Here is how that transition unfolded. Before 1996, the die-cut era, parts were stamped using steel dies, almost like cookie cutters. This often crushed plywood edges, leaving fuzzy outlines that builders had to clean up by hand. 1997 to 1999, the hybrid era, laser cutting began appearing in selected premium or new generation kits. The early flagship was the San Juan Nepomuceno, re-released in the late 90s with extensive laser cut parts. After 2000, the laser standard. By the early 2000s, nearly every kit in the catalog had been updated. If you see a laser cut logo on an Artesanía Latina box, it almost certainly dates from this millennium. And the ships weren't the end of the story. Over the years, Artesanía Latina has constantly experimented, branching into new product lines to see just how far their wooden manufacturing skills could stretch, and which other corners of the hobby they might explore. One of the most interesting and the least talked about experiments was their vintage radio kit line. Between roughly 1998 and 2001, Artesanía Latina released wooden kit inspired by radios from the 1920s to the 1940s, cathedral-style sets, tabletop radios, and even a few gramophone hybrids. They were built from real wood with brass dials and fabric speaker grills, but powered by modern AM, FM electronics inside. The idea was clever, and the reactions was mixed. Home deco fans loved them. They looked fantastic on a shelf. Hardcore scale modelers found them a bit too simple, and tech enthusiasts felt the electronics were, well, underwhelming. By around 2005, the radio line quietly disappeared. Certification costs were rising, digital audio was taking over, and Artesanía Latina made a clear strategic decision, refocusing on what they did best: ships. Today, those radio kits are rare, strange, collectible little side quests in the company's history, and a reminder that Artesanía Latina was never afraid to experiment, even if it meant occasionally sailing off course. By the middle 1990s, the original finders, the same thing that had guided Artesanía Latina through Spain's Spanish miracle, were facing a crossroads. Several forces were pushing the company towards change. First, there was a generational shift. Like many family-fund Spanish companies of the 1970s, leadership was transitioning to a new generation, one focused on modernization and preparing the brand for more global, digital future. Second, globalization pressures were mounting. Manufacturing costs in Spain were rising, while competitions from plastic kits and lower-cost Asian wooden kits were intensifying. And third, market stagnation. The dollhouse market, Artesanía Latina's original foundation, was cooling rapidly. To survive and grow, the company needed fresh capital and a far more aggressive strategy to fully pivot into the high-end naval modeling niche. That moment came in 1996, when the company was sold and transitioned to new ownership. Among longtime collectors, everything after 1996 is often referred to as the modern Artesanía Latina period, and the changes were immediate. You could see it right away in hobby shops. As we covered earlier, this era marked the final exit from dollhouses and a wave of experimentation, including side projects like the vintage radio kits. But some of the most important changes happened behind the scene. One of the biggest complaints about the pre-1996 artisanal kits was the instructions. They relied heavily on hand-drawn blueprints, often labeled only in Spanish, which confused many international builders. The new management tackled this head-on. They introduced full-color photographic instruction manuals, moving away from abstract diagrams and toward clear, step-by-step visuals. This single change played a massive role in Artesanía Latina's expansion into North America and other English-speaking markets. At the same time, the company made a strategic manufacturing shift to keep a price competitive while increasing detail. Much of the labor-intensive production things like small fittings and wood sorting was gradually moved to Southeast Asia, primarily Vietnam and China. Design, engineering, and overall kit development, however, remained rooted in Spain. It was a balancing act between cost, quality, and global competitiveness. And this leads to one of the most important and less known chapters in the story. Around 1999 to 2000, nearly the entire veteran design team left Artesanía Latina. The split wasn't personal, it was philosophical. As more productions began shifting overseas, these designers wanted something else. They believed the higher quality kits should stay more local, more Spanish, not just in design, but in spirit. They also felt the kit logic and the instructions were starting to stall, and they wanted to push clarity and craftsmanship further. So they left. They founded a new company. Both companies remained based in the same region of Spain, and for years, hobbyists joked that they were operating on opposite sides of the same street. Different names, different logos, but the DNA of that new company is deeply rooted in the golden era of Artesanía Latina's 1980s and 90s design team. And that is a story for another video. And Just when it looked like the story might finally be over, Artesanía Latina came back one more time. By 2019, the company wasn't struggling, it wasn't shrinking, it was gone. The website went dark. Kids vanished from hobby shop shelves. And for nearly 2 years, modelers around the world whispered the same question. Did Artesanía Latina finally disappear? Behind the scenes, the original company had fallen into deep financial collapse. Aging leadership, inconsistent quality of the overseas production shifts, and failure to adapt to digital age all hit at once. For a moment, it looked like 50 years of history were about to end quietly, without a headline. Then came to the rescue. In 2019, an Andalusian businessman and lifelong modeler who had grown up building Artesanía Latina kits stepped in. Through his company, Excellence Model Kits, he acquired the brand's trademarks, intellectual properties, and the remaining assets. This wasn't a liquidation, it was a revival. The headquarters moved south for northern Spain to Ajnal near Seville, and with that move came a new mission, not to sell off the past, but to rebuild the legend for a digital generation. First, and controversially, the paper manuals were gone. Instead of thick printed booklets, builders now scan a QR code that unlocks massive 800-plus page digital manuals, packed with high-resolution, step-by-step color photos. Cost-effective? Yes, but more importantly, clear and more detailed than anything Artesanía Latina had ever produced before. Then came the engineering overhaul. Classic icons like Santissima Trinidad and HMS Victory were released with a new N designation, signaling redesigned laser cut parts, better wood quality, improved fittings, and a cleaner kit logic, all while keeping the soul of originals intact. And finally, the business model changed. Instead of relying solely on traditional hobby shops, the new Artesanía Latina leaned hard into direct-to-customer sales, shipping worldwide straight from Spain. Faster access, broader reach, full control. I'm genuinely excited to see where this re-released kits go next, because this comeback wasn't just about nostalgia, it was about ambition. Artesanía Latina proved their creative fire haven't dimmed by launching bold new flagship projects. Messerschmitt BF109G 1-16's Metal Series, a stunning blend of stainless steel, die-cast metal, and real mechanical motion. HMS Victory Anatomy Edition 1-84 scale, a full cutaway model that reveals every deck and frame, turning ship anatomy into visual experience. And my personal favorite, the 2025 Chrome Jewel, HMS Surprise 1-48 scale, inspired by Master and Commander, based on the San Diego replica built from American walnut and Swiss pearwood, and aimed squarely at collectors and film fans alike. I loved that movie, and yes, I will be getting my hands on this kit. This release marked a clear new direction, history blended with pop culture, craftsmanship paired with storytelling. And honestly, who knows what's next? Assassin's Creed, Pirates of the Caribbean, Game of Thrones. For the first time in decades, Artesanía Latina isn't afraid to mix cinema, narrative, and traditional model making. They have become a bridge between nostalgia and innovation, between classic shipyards and pop culture seas. Artesanía Latina may never return to the wild boom of the 1980s, but they have done something even harder. They have discovered their soul. And I can't wait to see what they build next. Thanks for watching. If there's another wooden ship model brand you'd like me to cover, drop it in the comments. I will see you in the next one.